Imagine that the water your group has relied on for years is beginning to disappear. The shoreline pulls back. Animals visit less often. Plants that once grew nearby are harder to find. You know every path around this place, but staying is becoming dangerous. Beyond the hills, there may be another lake. There may also be nothing. No map can tell you. Why would ancient humans take their children, their tools, and everything they knew into territory no one in the group had ever seen? The answer reaches far beyond one drought or a sudden taste for adventure. It involves moving landscapes, repeated failures, and a kind of human flexibility that took an immense span of time to develop. Picture the usual map of human migration. One clean arrow leaves Africa and stretches across Eurasia. It is simple enough to understand in a second, which is exactly why it causes trouble. The arrow makes migration look like an expedition with a starting point, a destination, and people who knew where they were going. The archaeological record is far messier. At Dmanisi, in the country of Georgia, researchers found stone tools and remains of early members of the genus Homo in deposits dating to roughly 1.85 to 1.78 million years ago. These people were not Homo sapiens. They had much smaller brains than ours and relatively simple tools. Still, they had reached the edge of Eastern Europe. No one knows how many generations that movement took. It may not have felt like a journey. One group moved to the next valley. Years later, another group went a little farther. Given enough time, a population could cross an enormous distance without anyone imagining the continent ahead. The site records where some early humans ended up, not the route they followed. There is no trail of camps connecting Dmanisi back to a single starting point. That missing trail matters. It leaves room for many pauses, reversals, and local movements that will never appear in a clean migration map. Ancient humans did not need to picture Eurasia before entering it. They only needed a reason to move beyond the ground they knew. Our species spread in much the same untidy way. A jaw from Misliya cave in Israel, identified as Homo sapiens, dates to somewhere between about 177,000 and 194,000 years ago. A finger bone from Wusta, in what is now the Nephid Desert of Saudi Arabia, places Homo sapiens deep inside Arabia by around 85,000 years ago. Researchers have proposed even older examples from southern Europe, though some of those claims remain contested. Wusta did not look like the desert surrounding the site today. The finger bone was found in the setting of an ancient freshwater lake, alongside evidence of grassland animals. A place that now appears almost impossible to cross was, for a time, part of a connected and usable habitat. Those dates create a puzzle. Genetic evidence points to a much later expansion, around 50,000 years ago, as the source of most ancestry in people living outside Africa today. Human groups had entered other regions long before that expansion. Some remained for thousands of years. Some may have met and mixed with other populations. Many left little or no ancestry that researchers can detect in living people. Instead of one successful escape from Africa, the evidence records openings, advances, retreats, and populations that disappeared from view. Arabia preserves this pattern especially well. Much of the peninsula now looks like a dry barrier between Africa and Eurasia. During wetter phases of the Pleistocene, rain fed lakes and rivers across parts of that barrier. Grasslands spread into areas that are desert today. African animals entered the region, and human groups appeared near the water. Archaeologists working at sites in northern Arabia have identified at least 5 separate pulses of hominin occupation across roughly 400,000 years. The layers contain different stone tool traditions, perhaps made by different populations, or even different human species. People were present during periods of reduced aridity. As conditions dried again, populations contracted or disappeared from the interior. The old landscape tells us when movement became easier. It cannot tell us what anyone thought. A passable corridor creates an opportunity. It does not reveal why a particular group used it. Climate and sea level models add another piece. Researchers have used them to estimate when routes through the Levant or Arabia may have supported human movement. The results suggest several windows rather than one perfect departure date. Yet, these are still models. They depend on estimates of rainfall, vegetation, coastlines, and the environments people could tolerate. They can suggest where water and habitable land existed. They cannot recover a conversation held beside that water. What could make movement worth the danger? Pressure sometimes came from the place people already knew. A lake shrank. A reliable food source failed after several poor seasons. Herds changed their range. More people competed for the same ground, or relations with a neighboring group made one direction harder to use. Archaeologists can reconstruct parts of these conditions, but a stone tool never tells us this family left because they were hungry. There may also have been something worth moving toward. When rainfall and vegetation shift, animals move with them. Humans could track the same changing habitats. Following game to a new grazing area or moving camp toward dependable water might carry a group beyond its old range. Nobody had to decide to explore a continent. The move could be dangerous and still make sense. Familiar ground only protects you while it provides what you need. Once that balance changes, known risks can become worse than unknown ones. Arrival created a new problem. Reaching unfamiliar ground did not guarantee that a population could remain there. Early Homo sapiens entered regions outside Africa more than once. Yet most of those early dispersals did not produce the broad and lasting expansion seen later. Researchers still argue over why later populations persisted where earlier ones did not. A 2025 study approached that question by looking at what happened inside Africa before the major expansion. The researchers assembled a large database of dated archaeological sites, then modeled the climates and habitats occupied by Homo sapiens. Their results suggest that the human ecological niche began to broaden substantially around 70,000 years ago and peaked around 50,000 years ago. People were occupying a wider range of environments, including forests and arid regions. A broader niche does not necessarily mean a larger population, and the model cannot tell us which behavior produced the change. It shows a shift in the range of places people used. That distinction keeps the result useful without turning it into a story of sudden human superiority. This was not evidence for a magic invention that suddenly made humans unstoppable. The archaeological record offers no clean moment when everyone gained the same new tool or way of thinking. Complex behavior appeared at different times in different regions. Progress, if that is even the right word, was uneven. Some populations became better at making a life in very different settings. They could draw on varied foods and technologies. Materials moved over long distances at some African sites, which suggests that information and social relationships sometimes reach beyond a single camp. Knowledge about seasons, water, stone, and neighboring groups could reduce the danger of unfamiliar country. None of this describes every migrating population. It suggests that by the time of the later expansion, some Homo sapiens groups could remain in habitats that earlier groups may have used only during favorable periods. They were able to move between ecological zones and cope when local conditions shifted again. They also entered places where other humans already lived. Neanderthals had occupied Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Other human populations lived farther east. Encounters between these groups happened at different times and places. The evidence will not support a single tale of constant warfare or an equally simple story of peaceful welcome. Ancient DNA preserves part of that contact. Genomes from some of the earliest modern humans in Europe indicate that the Neanderthal admixture shared by non-African populations occurred roughly 45,000 to 49,000 years ago. People with ancestry outside Africa still carry a small proportion of Neanderthal ancestry today. The newcomers did not pass through empty land. They entered territories with people, memories, and histories of their own. The single arrow on the map breaks apart here. Migrants did not remain one population traveling in one direction. Groups separated, met other groups, mixed in some places, and vanished in others. Routes opened and closed. Arrival was only the beginning. A population had to find water, preserve useful knowledge, raise another generation, and survive long enough for someone to move again. What forced ancient humans into the unknown? The evidence does not point to one universal force. Changing climates shifted the places where water, plants, and animals could be found. Local shortages sometimes made familiar ground less dependable. Wetter periods turned parts of Arabia into usable grassland. Population pressure and relations with neighbors may have changed the cost of staying. Meanwhile, human flexibility made more kinds of environments survivable. The largest migrations in human history may have grown from thousands of local choices. A lake formed beyond the old range. Herds followed new grass. One group settled a valley farther on than its grandparents had known. Over many generations, those small movements carried human populations into worlds their distant ancestors could not have pictured. If the water source your family knew was shrinking, would you stay with the dangers you understood, or follow the animals toward a place no one in your group had ever seen? Tell me which choice you would make and why.